Hello again, and thank you for visiting my channel. Today I'm making a mini for AbsoluteDiceGoblin. She has requested a goblin armor artificer named Koshi and has provided some artwork for reference. I'm beginning by just quickly putting some clay onto a 2 cm armature and baking it hard. A more detailed layer will go over top of that. This metal that I'm working with to make her wrench is a piece of soldering wire that I have flattened out with a hammer. It is now thin enough and soft enough that I can just cut out the shape that I want with some small nail scissors. I'm starting off with a head, and as you'll see with this sculpt, I find heads really tricky. People have a natural tendency to pay close attention to facial details so much more than other details on the body, so a head that turns out as this first version did, asymmetric and lumpy, is going to stand out more than imperfections anywhere else. And this recorded version is picking up more detail than I usually see with the naked eye, especially when I'm holding the figure away from myself under the camera. So I'm showing this footage anyways, but keep in mind that after the rest of this figure is done, I do end up redoing the head. Koshi has a prosthetic left arm. In the artwork references provided, you can see her right arm is made of flesh, and the left arm, the prosthetic arm, is armored. As Koshi is an armor artificer, this makes sense, but I wanted to stray slightly from that depiction to make the part under the armor visible as well. The armor plates I'm using are just cut out from the same piece of soldering wire that I used for the wrench. I put the wire on a hex weight, I gently pound it out into a flat sheet, and then just use little scissors to cut out the pieces as needed. The scissors cut quite easily, but a few times in this video it appears as if I'm struggling to make the cuts. That's not really the case though. I slow down in my cuts to make sure I'm getting it just where I want. It can be quite hard to see when I'm cutting at this scale and the scissors get in the way of my line of sight with the metal. But when I get it just where I want and press, it cuts like butter. By layering the plates, it ends up looking more complex and layered than it really is. A little paint to the edges helps enhance that effect even more. Here, I'm just bulking out the figure a little more on the torso and legs. The torso doesn't really need much as it will be covered in armor, but the neck and shoulder gaps definitely do need a little more bulk, as you can clearly see here. For the boots, I'm just doing a quick wrap with tissue paper attached with varnish. More armored plates will be added later to complete the design. For the base, I'm just doing what I always do now, which is just forming a little mound on a penny and putting the extensions from the armature down into the mound. When it's done, you'll be able to see the impression from the penny on the bottom of it. I personally like the look, and you can decorate it further if you want by painting it or adding little details like moss or leaves. Koshi also has a metal armband on her right arm. In the reference art, it has some yellow eyes on it, which I just added with some glossy yellow paint. The armband itself is just cut from the same flattened solder. It's soft enough that I can press it against Koshi's tiny little arm and bend and pinch the metal until it fits nice and snug. This tunic, which you're barely even going to see once it's finished, is just a piece of tissue paper. Yes, I use tissue paper in my sculpting. With a little varnish applied to the tissue paper, it becomes sticky and easier to fold. I'm basically sculpting the tissue paper, so I don't have to cut it exactly to a nice tailored fit. The way it sticks to itself and flattens down really tight with the varnish, it tailors itself to the form. I do this for other clothing pieces like capes too, which remain flexible but durable when the varnish is dried. For the And now the armor. This is my favorite part. Since I've started using the solder sheets method, I'm finding it a lot easier to make good looking armor with crisp edges, good looking layers, and a metallic finish that is really hard to achieve with paint on clay. And version 2 of the head. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I got it a lot smoother and the facial details are less harsh and easier on the eyes. I achieved this by first taking my time a little more, and secondly by using a small paintbrush with Vaseline to smooth out the overall shape. Since polymer clay is oil-based, it takes the Vaseline nicely. And now the hair. I'm just using varnish to attach cotton. A little water here, a little more varnish there, and I can carefully sculpt the hair into all kinds of shapes. The cotton will absorb watercolor paint nicely, but in some spots the varnish competes for the cotton's attention and keeps it from properly absorbing the watercolor. I can touch it all up with another paint afterwards. For the goggles, I'm just making the whole thing out of another sheet of solder. The tricky part is cutting the small shape out just right, but I touch it up with a Dremel. A little paint to the eye sockets later on I think really completes the effect. Then, once the hair is dried and set, I can just bend the goggles onto the head. And lastly, we have Koshi's homunculus, a little paper mache octopus named Otto that hovers around with his little propeller on top. Otto gets his own base as well, although if I had wanted to attach Otto to Koshi's base, I could have put the wire holding him up onto her base, inserting it into her base while I was forming it, or I could have unraveled that support wire and wrapped it around one of Koshi's limbs to have him hovering above that limb. And here she is, along with Otto. I personally really like how this one turned out, and I hope that AbsoluteDiceGoblin does as well. I'll be mailing this off to her as I do with all my viewer giveaway sculpts. And that's mainly what I do on this channel here. Make minis for you, my viewers, at my own expense. If you enjoy my work and what I'm doing here and would like to support me, please like and subscribe. Add a comment here or there to get the YouTube algorithm suggesting my videos to more people. Thank you for watching.